The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. From time to time, we like to check in with Bronx elected officials to keep their constituents informed. And this evening, we talk with two city council members about a number of items: mask and vaccination rates, Bronx fires, homelessness, hate crimes, guns and violence in our streets. You know what the issues are, and all those kinds of things. So please join me in welcoming the council member from the Bronx's 18th CD, which includes the Bronx neighborhoods of Soundview, Castle Hill, Parkchester, Classen Point, Harding Park. It is Councilmember Amanda Farias. Nice to have you with us.
Hi, how are you, Gary?
We're doing well. Nice to see you again. Everybody's virtual, but we're going to get along nonetheless. And up in the North Bronx in the 11th District, which includes the Bronx communities of Bedford Park, Kingsbridge, Riverdale, Norwood, Van Cortlandt Village, Wakefield, Woodlawn, it is Councilmember Eric Dinowitz. Nice to have you with us, Councilmember.
Thanks for having me, Gary.
Let's start with you, Councilmember Farias. Let's just talk a little bit about you and how you're doing. I know that Councilmember Dinowitz, when he was first elected, we did bring him in and he gave us what it was like to be a council member. I know you had worked very hard to become an elected official. Dreams come true, more difficult than you thought. You regret every moment of it. Tell me where you were at.
None of that, Gary.
Oh, okay.
I am adoring every single day that I get to represent the community that I was born and raised in. Really, I feel super fortunate and I feel really grounded in the work that I get to do every single day. This is, the policy wonking, the budget line by line item stuff that really excites me. And so I'm having a really great time.
All right, I'm going to ask you a very plain question. Are you frustrated in saying, well, gee, I know you have real passion for your community and for the things that you wanted to do. We've talked for a long time over a period of time. Are you frustrated, or do you feel like, slowly but surely the water wears away the rock?
I'm not frustrated. I think I'm really lucky that I started with a really good team. And really great relationships in the council from working there for 4.5 years. So we were able to hit the ground running. And so while there are some hiccups, I think for every member or every new administration coming in, so far I feel like the work that we're doing is meeting the community where they're at, bringing them resources, answering their needs, but also being able to legislatively prioritize items in City Hall.
We're going to roll through a number of those items, as I said at the beginning of the show. Let's ask Councilmember Dinowitz a similar kind of question. I guess you haven't just started, but let's even compare your experience getting started to now when you got your legs a little bit. What do you think? How are you doing?
The job is still great. There are big citywide things that we're addressing, but just today we found out some very exciting news that we're getting a speed bump in one area and we're getting an all-way stop sign in another area. And there is a lot of frustration with city agencies very often, but when it works out and when you fight hard for something, it feels really great when it happens, because that speed bump, those stop signs, it's something the community's been asking for a long time. We've been able to get it. And it's going to make people safer. So there's that local stuff going on. And then there is the citywide stuff. We just reintroduced one of my pieces of legislation to expand the voter guide to make sure that we have an informed electorate. And that's going to make sure that every single person in the city who reads or gets that voter guide is going to have information about every candidate that's on the ballot at their fingertips, which is so important. So whether it's exciting local things like a stop sign or citywide impact, it's exciting, and there's a lot of work that we're getting done.
You know that if you're talking about voter literacy at BronxNet and at BronxTalk, you're preaching to the choir. So we support that. We support that wholeheartedly. Let's roll up our sleeves and talk to both of you about a number of issues. The first thing that's on well, I shouldn't say the first thing because there's about 10 first things, but one of the things that's on a lot of people's minds is the whole idea of vaccines and mask mandates. CDC guidance, Kathy Hochul responded to that, saying that the state would lift its mask mandates in most state schools. However, that didn't quite happen here in New York City. Councilmember Dinowitz, you were a teacher Monday. Now, we're taping this just to let people know Thursday. It will air Monday night. So sometime Monday, the mayor will make some decision. What are your concerns, Councilmember Dinowitz, having been in a classroom all those years, about the notion of either removing them or leaving them, making students still wear them to keep everybody even safer?
Yeah, since the beginning of the pandemic, I've been outspoken on what steps we need to take to keep us safe. I think the thing that I realize that many elected officials realize, and more importantly, parents, teachers, educators, and students realize, is that things change. The information, especially early in the pandemic, the information we were getting was constantly changing. The data, the positivity rates, that all change, and people are flexible and they understand they have to do their part. I think the frustration most people felt, was when changes were made last minute and without any notice. We would often be in teacher meetings and finding out from news conferences that we'd be going into school the next week, or that kids wouldn't be coming in, or that classes wouldn't start, or that they would start. And it was the same frustration with parents. I think one of the positive things about both the Hochul and the Adams administration is they've tried very hard to communicate what to expect in the coming weeks. Regarding vaccinations, I've been a huge proponent of vaccinations. One of the things I did early after I was sworn in was get mobile vaccination sites into the district. And it doesn't seem like a big deal now, but a little less than a year ago, vaccines were not as easy to come by, and the city did not have a robust system for rolling out the vaccines. But we were able to get some to the district, and now every school in the district, we've offered to bring the vaccine vans, or I'm not driving, get the vaccine vans back to the schools. Importantly, I think it's vital that we get our children vaccinated. I am in favor of adding vaccines, the COVID-19 vaccine, to the list of vaccines all children have to get before they enter school, like meningitis and polio. Those are vaccines they already take. COVID should be added to the list because our vaccination rates at our schools are not high enough right now.
I'm going to ask each of you this, since you were talking about it, Councilmember Dinowitz. Let's start with you. What about children under 5 in daycare and in preschool and all that kind of stuff? There's no vaccination for them. Are we still going to be maybe a little more cautious in those places? And frankly, I heard from a couple of parents who said, "Hey, you're going to have council members on. What about my child who's 4 years old? What do we do with them?" So,
well, I think.
Go ahead, you first, and then Councilmember Farias will respond as well.
Well, I think the mayor announced that children under 5 will continue wearing masks in classes. They're not eligible for the vaccine, and we have to be extra careful with our children. So that's the policy going forward. I know parents were concerned, but the mask mandate will remain for those under 5.
Councilmember Farias, you take the temperature of your community on a daily basis. What are parents and maybe even youngsters saying to you about the idea of masks and vaccinations?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question, and I think something that both Councilmember Dinowitz and our colleagues are constantly communicating back and forth with our constituency on. What I think we need to be moving towards is talking about how do we make this an ongoing public health priority. We need to realize that this is endemic, and how do we make this as best practice of both wearing masks when we don't feel well, but also prioritizing getting our vaccines when we can and when we're eligible. Truly, no one wants another person's flu or cold the same way as we don't want to spread COVID. And so we really need to talk about, as a society, how are we looking at our communities and our neighbors and our families and our young children who aren't eligible for the vaccine to look at this in a public health matter and say, how are we taking care of one another by using this in our hygienic best practices?
I really love what you said, because I know we try to find things that we've learned from the pandemic. I know when I came into the house through the pandemic, we would make sure to wash our hands for, the 20 seconds. And now that, things have done better, I find myself still doing it. I said, it's not such a bad idea. Let's try and stay safe. Let's move on. Let's talk about the mayor and the mayor's budget, Councilmember Farias. He has a $98.5 billion plan. People were thrilled about the fair fares, summer youth employment. You had a huge supporter in that from me and BronxNet about getting our kids to work and giving them good activities. However, he didn't make the 1% that he had promised for 1% of the budget to go to parks. Composting was cut. Again, I'm going to editorialize. These are the things that keep people alive and keep them going. We got to have them in our parks. We got to make sure that we're recycling and even thinking of green concepts. What is that a concern for you? Do you feel like, the council will just take care of it? Where are you at with the mayor's budget?
What I will say is we are all working on a preliminary budget schedule right now. So we just started. We just had our first group of meetings yesterday. And while there are things that are not lined out so far or not within the budget, we still have a lot of time to fight for some of those things that were cut, that we do not see included, or that we want to see have a more robust budgetary allocations to. I think there's still room for us to work on it. Some of the things that I am excited about are, the summer youth employment expansion. I think a lot of folks can agree, making sure that our kids have jobs this summer and after the course of the school year is a high priority, along with making sure that we can find other ways after this budget to expand that year long. There are definitely things that we need to prioritize still and make sure that we get through and see through on the budget before June 30th. But I have a lot of hope in myself and my colleagues who are on the Finance Committee. I
was going to ask you about really taking a look at the new City Council. Majority women, we know what has happened, to change the dynamic maybe in the City Council. Do you have confidence that on these kinds of items there is unanimity, that the council will be unified enough to maybe change the mayor's budget or maybe agree with some of the things that you and Councilmember Dinowitz are talking about?
Yeah, I think that what I've enjoyed most so far about 8 weeks being on the job is that we're all collaboratively working and really using one another as soundboards and looking at each other's priorities and being able to say, how do we work collectively and collaboratively together, especially on priorities that are both legislative, land use, and this budget, to make sure that we're fighting for each of our community's needs. So I do believe we'll be able to really unify and work together to pass a good budget.
Let's talk to Councilmember Dinowitz and start a quick dialogue about homelessness. The mayor has talked about taking homeless people off the subways. I'm just telling you what I've heard from subway riders. I haven't ridden the subway in a couple of weeks, but they're saying it's as bad as it's ever been. It has not been successful. Is this process of moving homeless people off the subways a good start to a much larger issue in dealing with homelessness in New York City?
Well, I think it actually relates back to the budget, the conversation we were having about the budget. And to borrow a phrase from the mayor, he says he wants to have an upstream mentality, meaning addressing problems before they come downstream. He's a lot more articulate than I am, but that's the point. But the point is really investing in programs like summer youth employment, which I'm thrilled about, to address issues before they become people sleeping on the subways. One issue I have with the summer youth employment is I want to make sure that there are enough seats slotted and reserved for people with disabilities.
Oh.
A lot of people who experience homelessness have disabilities. A lot of people who are incarcerated or being detained on Rikers Island have disabilities. And the reality is we have to ensure that we're providing what we need to provide for them before they make it on the subway, right? Before they're falling asleep on the subway, before they're being detained at Rikers Island. So there is a direct relationship between what we are investing in the budget and then what it looks like a few months, years, decades down the line in terms of homelessness on the subway.
In your district, there was quite a controversy over a proposal at 6661 Broadway to put a homeless shelter that was to be run by the African American Planning Commission. That particular organization has been under fire lately for a number of executive issues. You were against it, then Congressmember Bowman and Senator Biaggi said, well, wait a minute, maybe we should be a little kinder to homeless people. My feeling is the city didn't come through with enough information for anybody to make any judgment. Where is that project at? I know many of your constituents would want to know what you think about it at this point.
Yeah, well, just to be clear, it's not about kind or unkind. It is very clear if you are unhoused, if you're experiencing homelessness, you need help. And my question all along was, will the folks living in the shelter be helped? And my judgment is no, they won't be. Now, the plan is to put 6 people in a room, and we are being asked to just trust this organization that to provide services for people that will benefit both the people who are unhoused living in the shelter and in the surrounding community. And the reality is there was an article in the New York Times you mentioned. He's not under fire. I think he's under investigation. The New York City had asked him to make changes to his organization that he did not make.
Right.
Now, we as a community are being asked to trust this individual and trust this organization when they can't be trusted to simply comply with the law.
So, I mean, we're getting the idea of how you feel about it, and it sounds like more, in order to locate it there, more is going to have to be done. Councilmember Farias, let's talk a little bit about housing in your district. You have had a spate of fires. We've tragically seen fires in many neighborhoods in the Bronx, and it's quite disturbing. How are people doing? You know, we see people getting burned out of their apartments. I always wonder how do they get somewhere else? It just seems horrible. I don't know how else to express it. What have you been able to do? What are you working on?
Sure. So thank you for acknowledging, some of the tragedies that's happening in my district with the fires. Unfortunately, we have had 2 pretty prominent fires in the community, but we've had a couple small ones as well. In total, about over 50 individuals, lots of families that are now displaced and out of housing. My office fortunately went straight into action, has been on site for both of these instances, has been working with the city agencies and ensuring that we're getting folks all of their dire necessary items out of their houses or out of the apartments and into their hands, as well as helping them transition from the hotels into housing with HPD. And that has been a process in making sure that they're in direct communication and that we're helping get any documents or access to anything that could be supplied. It's definitely been difficult, but my district stepped up during the first fire. We did a call for toiletries and donations, and so we were able to provide folks both monetary assistance, additional clothing and food, both perishable and non-perishable, and really just helping to provide some mitigants in between for the time being. I
want to talk to each of you. We'll start with you, Councilmember Farias, about your chairmanships and the committees that you chair. You are the chair of the Economic Development Committee. Apparently, you're real big on this municipal jobs guarantee. Is this reality? Is this because this is pretty I don't want to say out of the box thinking because it's been out there, but this would be a sea change. Talk to me and to our viewers about what that is, and is it possible? Is it on the table? Is it going to happen?
Sure. So, I'm in the midst of working on looking at different ways that the city can better utilize their workforce development dollars. And what I ran on as a platform and what I'm hoping to help implement throughout the city is something called a municipal jobs guarantee, where we're streamlining workforce dollars. We're looking at where there's a dearth of employment in different municipally run sectors, where there's career pathways for people to really answer for the need of recovery and dearth of employment. So that, I ran a small pilot like this before I was in elected office, and I worked at a nonprofit really focused on the transit sector, where we took young people in career and technical education schools, put them through unionized workforce apprenticeship models, partnered up with CUNY to get credits in college, and they were doing on-the-job training. It's something on a small scale that saw massive investment and return, and it's something that could absolutely be implemented citywide.
Do you get a sense that your colleagues are backing your concepts here, or is it going to be a bit of a sale?
No, I don't think it's going to be a bit of a sell. Both to my colleagues, the folks that I've spoken with, seem really excited about it. I think we have a lot of young people and older adults that would like to be upskilled in their fields to move up in their careers, along with different sectors that really need investments when we're looking at the post-pandemic recovery. And quite honestly, it's in direct alignment with what I believe Mayor Eric Adams would like to see for workforce and economic recovery and development in this city.
I wonder if coincidentally it will go over to the guy in the next Skype box and say, well, wait a minute, he's the chair of the Higher Education Committee. Do you see this as, a direction, let's say that the CUNY schools, and certainly Lehman is building a nursing building and they're talking about developing careers. Sounds like we should break down the wall of the Skype box and get you guys together on this particular issue. You like the idea of what you've heard there, and will it interface, and will CUNY and the other universities in the Bronx interface with this?
Gary, I think you've solved the workforce development / education problems we're facing here in the Bronx. Now, and I'm really glad Councilmember Farias brought up CUNY, because one of the questions we're addressing on the committee, one of the questions I seek to address is, does CUNY meet the needs of the city? So if we're talking about green jobs, are the programs at CUNY meeting the needs so that there's a pool of applicants from the city, from New York City, the highest needs students, are they getting the skills and the degrees necessary to fill those jobs? I mean, look, almost half of students at CUNY make under $20,000. CUNY was made in order to meet the needs of, I think the phrase is, disadvantaged New Yorkers. It was made for everyone. And so we have to make sure CUNY is meeting their needs by meeting the city's needs. Whether you're talking about green jobs, I think you mentioned nursing. That's a field where we need development. We have a great need for social workers and teachers. And our shelter system or our schools need more social workers, need more teachers, and CUNY students and graduates can fill that need. And the other question that's guiding us is are we meeting the needs of the students and the faculty? So I mentioned before, almost half the kids are making under $20,000. They're not all kids, rather. As a former teacher, I'm so used to calling my students kids. I mean, almost half the students, undergraduates come from the families making under $20,000. And so very clearly there is a need for housing services, for food pantries, not to mention mental health and social emotional supports. So are we meeting those needs in addition to the academic needs? And those are two questions that are really driving us, driving me as chair of the committee.
So many issues, Councilmember. I'm just going to move to another one that you have worked very hard on. You have had a roundtable on anti-Semitism. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, because we all agree that the diversity in the Bronx is one of the most beautiful and wonderful things. I mean, I don't have to tell you, in my floor, in my building, I got people from literally all over the world. Yet in our borough and in your district, there have been, hate notices and things like that. Talk to me about changing the dialogue, changing people's minds who don't think in fair-minded ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to change people's minds, but we're starting those conversations. So for the viewers who are not familiar, a few weeks ago, and many weeks in a row, we had vandalism in District 11, the N-word. There were anti-Semitic symbols and words. And I think, the story I told was that, my son, who's 7, asked me about the graffiti. And, it's when you're explaining things to a kid, I think it's sort of those aha moments maybe, but if you think about what is racism, it's for the simplest, for the most minimum of reasons, someone hates someone. There's like a maximum of hatred for that person. And that there are words and symbols that exist in our language that exemplify that hate. I don't want to run out of time here. What do you recommend? What do we do to address it? Right. So I want to be clear. There's no silver bullet. I think everyone's always looking for the answer. I can tell you what I'm doing is on Monday, we're meeting with a diverse group of leaders from the community to talk about those solutions, what it means locally, what it means legislatively. There's a few pieces of legislation I'm working on right now. But at the end of the day, I believe that one of the main places we have to address this is in our schools. Our job as adults is to teach the next generation, to teach them better than us. And there's a whole set of policy wrapped up in standardized testing and the curriculum.
I do want to move on. I'm in total agreement. As you know, I spoke to you earlier that I've heard people say that they think it was kids who was doing it, which I don't know if it's more or less disturbing than if it was somebody, who really has, some real hatred that they've developed over years. I don't know. Councilmember Farias, before we leave, and then we'll go back to Councilmember Dinowitz, who has a little bit of different process. Let's talk about participatory budgeting. You've opened up your office, you've opened up your mind. You want to hear what residents say. Have they said the right things? Have they said things you are surprised at? Just talk about that.
Yeah, this is a very exciting thing. It's like my council career in full circle because I was on the steering committee and managed participatory budgeting when I worked at City Hall. And now I'm actually able to open up my capital budget up to $1 million and let the community decide where it goes. We had a short time frame to start, but we did get the most projects out of all the participating council districts in the Bronx. We're seeing lots of folks really interested in bolstering up our schools and seeing beautification in our parks, which makes total sense. 2 spaces during the pandemic that were hit heavy.
I want to give Councilmember Dinowitz, so you have a little bit of a different process than the traditional participatory budgeting. You're kind of running forums or things. Just give us about 30 seconds, then we got to go.
30 seconds, we're doing Google Forms, and we're having tabling events throughout the community. And basically, it's for all of the capital funding. And the reason we chose it is this simply: we analyzed the survey data from participatory budgeting in the past. And the people who voted in participatory budgeting in the past did not represent a cross-section of the district. So we're doing our outreach to ensure that the voices who were traditionally left out are included in our budget process this year.
Councilmember Amanda Farias, thank you so much, from the 18th Council District in the Bronx. Good luck. And we know we're going to ask you to come back, and we'll continue to all the issues that we have not been able to do. And Councilmember Dinowitz, same thing for you. We appreciate your time, and we'll see you around town. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank
Folks,
you,
guess what? It's the end of the show. Thanks for joining us. We thank our great producers, is Stephen Powell and Rebecca Hemick. Our director is Benaiah War. And we're going to see you next week. Good night.